in China, people can think wrongly. It's a central government, it's an authoritarian government. But my study is Brazil is de facto and a de jure federation, because it's de jure because we are federation in the constitution, and de facto because we have subnational levels, and the central government has to make some bargains to talk to subnational levels. So they are equal juridically.
Oh, really?
Okay, in China, China is not de jure.
It's central.
Yeah, it's central government, but it's a de facto federation, and it's called authoritarianism, fragmented authoritarianism. So the subnational levels governments are very strong, the private actors are very strong, and the central government has to negotiate, to bargain, the same way you do in a federation. That's why I'm comparing Brazil. So I built this analytical frameworks for everything to say that's why I'm talking about China and Brazil. So what did China do, and what is China still doing, because you need to do this all the time, is to institute politicians with sometimes subsidies, and sometimes you put subsidies, sometimes you don't put subsidies, but you facilitate some things. For example, these automobiles you see all around with blue plates, they are conventional. Okay, they are fossil fuel vehicles. The ones you see with green plates, they are electric vehicles. The ones you see with green and white plates, they are hybrid. For the hybrid, for the EVs, lots of incentives to buy. It's cheaper. It's cheapest. It's cheaper to buy an EV. You get in a line that is shorter than the other one. So the government make a long line if you want to buy a non-friendly vehicle. The line is longer. The price of the vehicle is higher, is more expensive. The price of the fuel is more expensive. But in Brazil, we don't do this because we are relying on fossil fuels. So we have to change by institutional.
So the government
to
is like
educate
forcing it
people
down the throats of the citizens.
Yeah,
You know, by the time you look at the costs.
by showing empirically.
Wow. Now, that also brings me, a political scientist, that brings me to the subject of democracy,
Yeah.
which we, of course, have uh, practiced for a very long time now. Is it really working? The style of democracy, is it really working for us?
We have the central government in China, but it has to bargain with the local government. And these policies that I talked about, they are local policies. They are not central. Central is the institutional arrangement, the biggest one, but locally, Shanghai is different from Beijing, from Wuhan, from Guangdong. They have different incentives and different arrangements for this. So I'm not saying that we have to force the citizen. We have to make the laws and institutions work, and show it empirically that things can work. For example, when we talk about democracy, in Brazil we have this arrangement, we have this institution, but no one can explain why, for example, on one of the last auctions, we have transparent auctions. They say it's transparent, but something happened. For example, one auction of energy, thermal energy won, but thermal energy won solar energy. But thermal energy at that auction was 5 times higher, the price, 5 times more expensive than the price of the solar panels. So it was a political decision. So they didn't respect the law. So if even in the democracy or even in autocracy, The laws exist, but if people with power, agenda power, don't respect, the citizen can't do anything, even if the citizen wants the car. Because, for example, Beijing is a very good laboratory because when they started instituting EVs here, there was such a chaos because of the traffic,
Yeah.
and people were getting richer, so they wanted these big cars. They wanted to show
Yeah,
that
of
they
course.
have access to these. It's a way of status. So there was a problem with this, and the government had to make lines to make people wait for the plates, etc. One big policy, one good policy that can be adopted by democracies or non-democracies is, for example, blue tags are forbidden for taxi.
Mm.
Blue plates are forbidden for taxi. If you want to drive a taxi, you have to use an EV.
Mm.
So it's not kind of a violence, it's
Yeah.
kind of education.
Of course.
Because
Because
taxis
they're always on the
drive
road,
yes,
you know, so they have to embrace the renewable energy.
yes, you have to facilitate something into difficult others by institutions, by law.
Wow, there's so much lessons to learn. Brazil is providing leadership in this regard in Latin Americas.
In
and,
Caribbean.
They supply energy to some of them, those countries. Talk me through of course, if you are making so much money from supplying energy, you know, you don't want to change the structure.
This is very curious because, for example, some critics that don't know the subject, for example, they think, China is investing heavily in Brazil in hydropower because China wants the resource, etc. But energy in Brazil is not for exporting. Hydro energy in Brazil is not for exporting. So not China, nor the neighbors, no one has this energy from Brazil. Brazil imports natural gas from Bolivia, but Brazil doesn't supply the others with hydropower. Even though China invests in Brazil, the money that China invests is for Brazilian infrastructures, and for Brazil energy sector, and for training, for making Chinese enterprises strong. It's not to get the energy.
Yeah, of course. It's a give and take.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's come to the middle income trap.
Yes.
know, Brazil is Brazil have been at that level for a very long time.
Yeah.
You know, with its potential, not just Brazil, Argentina, and all those neighboring countries, but Brazil particularly now as a case study. Why is it difficult to transit to high income country? You know, with its potential, enormous potential, its experience. It's one of the fastest growing economy at some point, but it was caught up in that middle income trap. What's the issue?
Great. A friend of mine, he just defended a thesis called middle income trap.
Yeah.
Middle power trap. Talking about Brazil and India. Brazil has been a middle power since the 2000s, but why doesn't Brazil transcend? Is your question? It's because the way that Brazil became a middle power, it was by contingency.
Okay.
It was by the necessity of the real powers in the world of our commodities. And it was because the Washington Consensus opening Brazilian market for foreign industries, because up to the 1990s, we were not open. We were using the substitution model of industry.
Trade.
Yes, import. And after this, with Collor de Mello government, and after that, Itamar Franco, after Collor was impeached, Itamar Franco, then his minister of Fernando Henrique Cardoso, that was president for 2 terms, and after that Lula for 2 terms. We had a long time of restructuring under the consensus, and after that, under our own rules. But we got caught in this middle power trap because the way we achieved this status of middle power, it was by contingency, not because we were a real middle power at that time. For example, we were to be a power, the concept of power, you have to have followers because you are a leader. Brazil at that time was a leader without followers. Its political, its policies, economic policies, mostly were not followed by Argentina, Chile, Venezuela, etc. So, and we didn't have military capacity. It's another thing that you need to be called power.
Yeah.
But we had the commodities, and the world was in need of commodities. So they update our status, and if you applied the realistic lenses to analyze, we were not a real power at that time, and that's why we don't transcend. We had, with this process, with Itamar Franco, with Collor de Mello, Itamar Franco, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, and Lula, a kind of deindustrialization, but it was a negative one because we have two kinds of deindustrialization. The one is a positive for the welfare states, for example. They achieve a point that they had invested heavily in all kinds of industries, so they don't need to invest anymore or any large amount of money, so they can divert this money to health, education,
Yeah.
culture, and other things. This is deindustrialization, the positive one, the positive deindustrialization. But in case of Brazil, it was a negative one. We didn't surpass the path of heavy industries. We didn't invest sufficiently. We had to stop to invest because we didn't have any more money. And the money that we stopped investing in industry was not diverted to education, culture, etc. So
Yeah.
this is the negative deindustrialization. So it's this contingency. We were not a real power. We didn't have followers. We were a leader without followers,
Yeah.
and we didn't have the military capacity, and we had a negative deindustrialization. That's why it's difficult now.
Well, okay. Let's look at it again. Um, at the point Brazil was designated middle income, you've clarified that it was contingency middle income
Yeah.
designation. China was low income country at that time.
Yes.
Now, China had made progress over the years. Now, they're still they are middle income now,
Yeah.
but there's argument that they have achieved upper income, and high income country, but they're still not accepted that. Of course, we look at their GNI. That's the argument by World Bank and all that. But let's come to Brazil. Now, Brazil had that sufficient time, and you talked about negative industrialization.
Yeah.
What are the primary issues that was not dealt with? Is it just not in reinvesting into that sector? Because, of course, Brazil has not achieved the full industrialization scale, but there was time, there was the goodwill, that was enjoyed from the international perspective. Now you could trade and all that. So was it leadership problem again?
Yeah.
That we couldn't, Brazil could not go full scale.
Yes. This leadership problem, it's also cultural because we have the barrier of the language.
Okay.
I was talking about this just yesterday with Dr. Sheng from Ford Foundation, and Brazil speaks Portuguese, and the rest speaks Spanish, and a little speak French, but they are not the same language, and this is a big problem. Not the biggest one. Talking about China, China was one of the countries that needed Brazil commodities at that time
Yeah.
was one of the reasons that Brazil had its status updated. But China invested in indigenous solutions. China looked inside to its history and to its resource, because China was having problems with shortage of energy. It was in a right path of development, but was polluting with coal, etc., and wanted to participate in the world, in the World Trade Organization, for example, and it had to solve its own problems. Brazil, on the other hand, was is still in the path of Washington consensus. So bringing solutions from abroad.
Yeah.
We have to look to indigenous solutions.
Wow. And that's always been my argument about development. We want to copy and paste policies from
Yeah.
United States, from Europe, and just want to dump it, not without looking at the local context.
Yeah.
And all that. So, let's shift away from our main focus for today.
Okay.
I noticed you don't wear Brazilian colors. What's it about?
Yeah. I saw one of your interviews, and I loved because you interviewed someone from Senegal,
Yeah.
and he brought a pillow,
Yeah, true pillow.
a stylized pillow with the colors of Senegal.
Yeah.
In fact, we had some problems in Brazil. We are still facing these problems, political ones, because the last government was an extremist government, and its followers, they were right-wing extremists. So its followers they kidnapped our colors, the colors of Brazil, especially the yellow shirt of Brazilian team. And they used this color, saying they were patriots, and the other ones were not patriots.
So there was division.
Now we are reassuming the colors because they are of all Brazilians, not only for one group or another. And we are saying that the government, even though if it's not your government, the government that you put there, that you vote there for it, once it's there, the government is for everyone, for me that voted and for you that didn't vote to this government. So he could not govern just for his group.
Yeah.
Okay, and now he's facing.
He's the leader of all.
Yeah, now he's facing criminal charges. Some of his friends were arrested just yesterday in Brazil. Some militaries, generals of 4 stars.
Wow.
People intercept the federal police intercept some calls. They building the coup d'état. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you remember January 8th in Brazil? So they are being arrested now.
Wow.
Some of them were arrested just yesterday in Brazil. Wow. And all of them are linked to the last incumbent that was Jair Bolsonaro.
Wow. That's
so if you use this color now, we don't want to be associated.
Okay.
I want to use. I want to use. It's my color. I'm Brazilian, but not now.
They have hijacked it, and wearing it now, we feel you're part of them, and the color should be for everybody.
Because
until it becomes a national color again before you embrace it totally. Let's talk about your ancestry. Are you connected to Africa?
Oh man. Unfortunately, not. Not me personally, but I can say, for example, my father is very funny because he was born in Bahia, the biggest black country, the city outside Africa countries, and Rio de Janeiro is also one. My father was born in Bahia, but he moved to Belo Horizonte, where we live, when he was 2 years old. He is 80 He is
Okay.
80 years old now. He's an optician,
Wow.
but he used to paint some pictures, etc. And he used the colors, that African colors, that resembles.
Yeah.
He has some in his subconscious. Uh, I, I think I suffer from the violence that they did to us.
Okay.
Because when they displaced these people from Africa for that slavery violence
Yeah.
for 300 years, people didn't have more the name of family, of tribes. They
Yeah.
were taken to different ports. So when they arrived in Bahia, in Rio de Janeiro, in Minas Gerais, wherever São Paulo, wherever they were sent to work as a
Yeah.
slave, they were sent from ports and they received the name of the ports. They didn't receive a real name. My connection with through research, for example, I wrote something talked about cordial racism in Brazil, because people used to say that we had a kind of a cordial racism, different from the United States, that
Yeah.
they use violence, for example. But nowadays, since the last government, now the racism in Brazil is not cordial anymore. They lynched black people on the streets.
Wow.
They hanged black people on the street, but saying that they were thieves. But the same thieves, if they were white, they didn't do anything.
That's
So
it.
racism, but it turned with this last government. It turned not more cordially. So I wrote something much before this government, much before, called cordial racism deconstructed.
Okay.
I went to history and I showed that that's not the way.
Wow.
That's my
So-
connection.
Okay. There's so many, of course, Africans in Brazil. You know, in fact, Nigeria, and in fact, Yoruba, the Nigerian language, my language, is
Yeah.
spoken in Brazil now.
Yeah,
Do you know about that?
I know lots of words.
You need to learn it.
Yeah.
You know, the Yoruba
We
culture.
use unconsciously. Lots of words of our vocabulary are from indigenous people from Brazil, from people from Africa, especially Yoruba language.
So when are you visiting Nigeria?
Oh man, I have to.
You need to come and check Nigeria out.
I have some friends in Nigeria. I have to go. I
You
have to.
to come.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having
Nice
me,
having
man.
this interview with you. I hope you will join us again when we invite you for that.
There in Nigeria, and if
Yeah.
you go to Brazil, you will feel very welcome.